Hello, hello, good evening. Stream, we're live, we're live, we're live. Hi. Good evening. I hope you have a good evening. I hope you had a good day. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you're safe out there. Today, we do not have a topic. Good news, we got the audio issues under control, so you should hear me okay. But today, no topic. Instead, I thought I would talk about this thing. I'm giving a talk, a keynote at the UXistanbul mid-April. It's going to be cool. Loads and loads of amazing speakers there. It's going to be in the Metaverse extension. Great speakers, great people to just listen to, be inspired by. And hey, here's me. Cool. So, giving a talk there. And I thought, I don't have a talk yet. I'm going to create a talk, and I'm going to talk about creating a talk. I have to do it at some point, so I thought I might as well do it live, which is giving you the opportunity, guys and girls, to comment and say, hey, I want to learn more about X, I want to learn more about Y, why don't you talk about this, why don't you talk about that? So either this is going to be a very boring stream of me just creating a PowerPoint and talking about it, or, just leave a comment. If you're live, drop me a note, say hi, ask stuff, that's fine. If you're watching this after the stream is done, hi, leave a comment, leave a like, that's perfectly fine. If you leave a comment before April, I can maybe incorporate it. If you don't, that's fine too. Leave a comment anyway, say hi. But yeah, that's the plan for today. Excited, it's going to be a bit different. The usual stuff. Before we start, house rules. Just very quickly, I'm usually a very diverse and inclusive speaker when it comes to the metaverse. I don't necessarily like just having one perspective on the metaverse. I try to be as inclusive as possible, and so we're trying to have a very inclusive round. If you say you want to know more about X and somebody else doesn't necessarily like it, we can discuss it. We can go back and forth on our opinions, and that's perfectly fine. But we need to stay respectful. And number two, please be aware I work for Microsoft. But this is a private channel, right? This is a private project. So I'm not going to talk about work. I'm not going to answer any question about work. I'm not going to talk about Microsoft per se. So I'm not here to pitch you. Likewise, I would ask the same from you. Leave your work kind of at home. Let this be a stage in a room where we can essentially share our field notes in a private, relaxed, safe space, and not talk about work, not pitch our projects, not pitch whatever we're working on, but instead just have a nice round conversation. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So much for the house rules. And with that, let's get into the presentation. Honestly, I don't have a title yet, right? This is what is on the card, but I don't necessarily know what I want to do yet. This is a deck that is roughly based on the deck I showed at the Enter the Metaverse conference in December. I will use it as a baseline, but then I want to, just change the direction a bit. The Enter the Metaverse conference was more around, it was around business opportunities. At least the second part of it was around business opportunities. It was around the perspective of brand and how could businesses and brands prepare for the metaverse. And obviously, UXistanbul is going to be a little bit more about the user experience side of things and the design side of things. So how do we think as designers creating the metaverse? And there are a couple of things we don't necessarily talk about. And I do not want to talk about deep down design. I do not want to necessarily talk about things like, hey, how do you design buttons in mixed reality? How do you design interfaces in mixed reality? There are other good talks for that. This is a keynote, so I want to inspire a bit, and I want to talk about a couple of topics that I think are going to be important for the user experience as people enter virtual worlds or the metaverse. So taking that just as a, hey, what do we have as the topics? I like to start with the why the metaverse is confusing, because it kind of helps. It kind of sets the starting tone with, okay, this is what you heard the metaverse claims to be. And I use it to literally pick people up and say, okay, I know you think the metaverse from this perspective, I know you think the metaverse being that perspective, that perspective. I try to like pull them in and say, okay, but this is kind of like confusing because you're not really talking about the same thing. So let's first establish that I'm talking to all of you. But it's kind of like being very confusing talking to all of you, and this is kind of like recognizing that you might come from a technology background, you might come from an ideology background, and you might come from a from a different background in how you define a metaverse. I don't know if I want to do the second part, ways to approach a metaverse. After I say, okay, this is everything, I need to establish a baseline. And this is essentially what it is. Establish a baseline, not necessarily definition. It's kind of like an approach, how to think about the metaverse in the context of this talk, right? So this is literally just, hey, this is how we define the metaverse this is what I'm going to talk about, right? It sets a context, it sets the setting. And this is what I usually talk about, ways to approach the metaverse, right? Let's set a context, let's establish a baseline, let's agree on what the boundaries are, what we're going to talk about. And then the third thing I want to talk about is essentially like, what does all this mean for UX designers and strategists in terms of emerging questions around the metaverse. Right, that's kind of what I answer, what I want to answer. And for now, let's just call this implications. And the first section, I have half an hour for the talk. It's a 30-minute talk. By this point, I'm pretty much used to these like super slide heavy decks. This is usually like a 30-minute deck, which has 90 slides, which is insane. But like I'm using slides to illustrate a point, but not necessarily to read, right? That slide, for example, is illustrating a point that people do have very different definitions of what the metaverse currently is, and that there's not much overlap between those, right? So it's just an illustration to kind of make the point, but people should never read my slides. If they should read the slides, there's literally just one specific statement, very clear, that is making the point, but I'm actually talking over it. So they read the slides, get the idea, and then they move on. And the way I think about these kind of like slides is literally, okay, if you have to actually make a point, keep it so that people can just tweet it. But this is like the beginning. This is the part of why the metaverse is confusing. And this is the same thing I gave in the 2 weeks ago in the Enter the Metaverse Extended. This is literally pretty much the same thing. It's a little bit tailored. I don't necessarily talk about the business aspect and just go straight to, hey, there are different perspectives. And then ways to approach the metaverse. So this deck has 3 approaches, and I do think it's very vital to think about metaverse as it really started with virtual worlds, and not necessarily social virtual worlds. That was kind of like it started with virtual worlds where people understood that these are really social virtual worlds. And this is like similar to what we discussed or what I discussed in the second article for the Fieldnotes from the Metaverse, which was around MUDs and like, what is a social virtual world? right? And this is kind of like bringing back to home, okay, this is how we define social virtual worlds. And if you do that, you essentially are in a metaverse. And then I continue going into the metaverse roadmap and the quadrants in the metaverse roadmap, because I think this is the most inclusive definition we have, and it's a very good definition to just show. The second aspect, it talks about how to approach the metaverse in terms of looking at it. Hey, these are the usual visions. It's very quickly, but it kind of shows that the quadrants do not live in isolation. And then the third one is really, really quick, just making sure to drive the home that the virtual actually has value. And this is kind of like, this is where I leave everybody. Well, like, you're all right? You have your perspective, you have your perspective, you have your perspective. You're all part of the metaverse. Congratulations, you're essentially working on the same thing. You might work on different quadrants, you might work on different aspects with different perspectives. You might not like each other, but essentially you're working on the same thing. So it's a very inclusive model. So what are my points that I want to actually make? Implications. And again, this is just TBD title. And this was then business stuff, right? This was going in terms of, okay, technology, narrative actuation, inspiration. This is good to discuss if you're doing business. But let's do something else. Let's take the last two. And pull these up. There we go. And then we add a new one. Nope, new slide. Big statement white. Do not use past this slide. And we make it in a horrendous color, so we're not tempted to actually use this stuff. Yes. So what do we want to talk about? One thing I would like, one option is to talk about identity. I do really think that identity as a concept is super important for the metaverse. And we know this from social virtual worlds. Identity is the thing that we immediately bring into virtual worlds as we enter them. We are represented in some way in this virtual world. It is a representation of us. It is a part of us. It is our identity. How do we shape that? It's super important. And I'm not necessarily talking about skins of an avatar. I'm literally talking about what is the avatar? What's the representation? And this is very complicated. It's very complicated from a conceptual point of view. What even is identity? That's a very complex question with even more complex answers. And then how do you represent your identity? And if you listen to people like Raf Costa or especially Richard Bartle, identity and virtual worlds are about identity exploration, because you can essentially be whatever you want. You can, the easiest thing, and this is going back to what even is your avatar. You can be male or female. I can be, if I start a game of, for example, I don't know, EVE Online, I can choose my character. I can choose my gender. I can be male or female. I can be whatever. But it doesn't necessarily stop there. I can be an alien. I can, and what even is gender or sex for an alien? Well, I don't know. I can be something in between. I can be a glugluck from Orc. Cool. So it's totally fluid how I represent myself, and then I can I can also use things to represent myself. If I want, I can be a car. I can be a car from my favorite car brand. I can be essentially whatever represents myself in that moment and whatever identity I want to explore, because other people will recognize me as that identity. Other people would see me as that car from that car brand, or I don't know, coffee machine. And then it will react to me as, hey, this is a coffee machine. So identity is super interesting. It's also interesting because I think people haven't realized that form of identity exploration is a very complicated topic, in the sense that people are not comfortable doing so, usually in public. For example, if you think VTubers, well, let me rephrase. Is it socially accepted on average if I choose a VTuber with a different ethnical background than the one I have? Because my VTuber avatar can be black, can be Asian, can be whatever, right? But is that the same as blackfacing? Some people will think so. And this is more than a generational thing. But that's an interesting thing. But then if you do that, and if you talk like that, if you then back it up with mannerisms, is that cultural appropriation? For some, probably. But what if I represent an alien? Do I culturally appropriate Mercedes-Benz if my avatar is a Mercedes-Benz car? Well, I'm impersonating their brand values, am I? Aren't I? So lots of interesting questions around these things. And then if my VTubing avatar is an Asian, and I exhibit Asian mannerisms and I make a joke about Asians, so I'm an Asian avatar making jokes about Asian, acting Asian, but it's really me, obviously not being Asian. How does all that social dynamic work if literally everything is fluid? Culture, representation, embodiment. The whole thing in the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog. Well, yeah, kind of that's the point, and that's cool, and that's actually an opportunity to explore other viewpoints, right? The whole walk a mile in my shoes thing, I can actually do. Is that a bad thing? It's a complicated thing. So back to, I want to talk about all this identity stuff. It's a super interesting topic. I think 2022 is going to be the year when a lot of people will kind of like recognize that there's trouble brewing, or will be the first year that society on a like society level will be probably exposed to these questions, driven by VTubers, driven by large-scale adoption of virtual worlds, or at least beginning large-scale adoption of virtual worlds. Because honestly, we have huge-scale MMOs for a long time. We have like 20 million, 25 million, a huge number of people playing MMOs that are already familiar with that, but in a very designed manner, right? If I design an MMO, I obviously, as a game designer and as a creative designer, I make a couple of choices. I give boundaries of the exploration. I create kind of like this magic circle of, this is what I want people to explore. This is the frame I want them to explore in. And we will essentially break those, a lot of the, not break, but expand those magic circles a lot. So identity is super interesting thing, and I definitely want to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about is relationship design. And this is the idea that if things get more and more, if things act more and more if they had a personality, then our user experience with them will be a relationship. What do I mean with that? Well, if you have, for example, let's get back to the car, Mercedes-Benz, they have a digital assistant in their car. Essentially, that is a personality, right? That's a digital representation of a character that is talking to me, and obviously we humans are very good at humanizing the thing immediately if it vaguely represents intelligence, especially if we don't understand how it works. And so we will accept that as a conversation partner, and thus the user experience that we form with that personality will be a relationship. But that gives us, as designers, the opportunity to shape and form those relationships, right? Because there was a specific team that made conscious choices how to design that, for example, back to that digital assistant in the car. Mannerisms, tonality, how it talks, when it talks, how it approaches, how it answered. So all those elements of personality were designed based on, for example, the expectations of the user, the embodiment of the car. But if we design a personality, then again, the user experience will be a relationship. The kind of aesthetics that we want to form, the dynamic between user and thing, will be a relationship. So essentially, we're designing relationships between things, or more general actors, because it can be a virtual thing, right? It can be just a virtual actor. It doesn't necessarily matter if the car is real or in a virtual world. So it doesn't necessarily matter if it's a real thing that is acting, that has a bot inside, or just a bot, a conversational endpoint. As we do that, there needs to be a group of people that designs that interaction. And that's an interesting new set of capabilities that currently we don't necessarily think about. Cat. So this is the second thing I want to talk about, or the second big block I want to talk about. Number 3, and this is going to be, and here I'm debating, again, I have 30 minutes and this might be too much. Governance. Governance is a huge thing in virtual worlds, and it needs to be deeply integrated in a design process. What do I mean with that? Well, Raf Costa has a great talk about that. He talks about governance all the time, but essentially if you design a virtual world, you are as you are the designer, you have specific goals that your virtual world has, right? It might be something vague like fun. It might be provide players with a competitive environment. It might be provide them with a collaborative environment. It doesn't necessarily matter. You will likely have goals. And you need to be very purposeful, design that goals. So you're creating a safe space. And yeah, in reality, we talk about creating safe spaces all the time, but literally here you have a space that you have fully and totally under your control. Well, that's not quite true. In virtual worlds, at least, in certain like VR worlds, you have the space, like AltSpace VR, Horizon worlds, you have the entire space under your control, and you can set up the governance to be in a way that fully enables your goals, but in a manner that is like in line with your values. You have how people should act and how people should be kept safe in that virtual world. So that there's, for example, no abuse, that there are people not disturbing others while they're fulfilling their goals, that kind of stuff. And that needs to be very purposeful. even and then there are obviously quadrants where you don't necessarily have control, like mirror worlds or like augmented reality, but even there you need to create safe environments, in the sense that, for example, for augmented reality, you're not blocking out the view of potentially, you're not blocking the view in potentially, for example, hazardous environments, right? You're making sure that people can still see clearly, that they have a good overview, things like that. You want to make sure that people are just generally kept safe. You're avoiding distractions. For example, in AR, if you have a heads-up display and you're in a car, you want to avoid distracting overlays, because the driver should still concentrate on the outside. Things like that, right? So there's a lot in terms of governance you need to be aware of when you design your experiences. And cat, let me let the cat out. Back. So it needs to be very, very deliberate. And that's interesting. That's a huge field where you could probably talk about for hours. So yeah. Those three. Obviously, after that, quick summary. That's what I always want to leave them with. I really think I kind of like passionately dislike the fact that we have this view that people like define it as, try to claim and appropriate the term metaverse. I mean, metaverse is only X, Y, Z. I think that's annoying. It should be inclusive, but it should be secure, and this goes back to governance. It should be sustainable. That's also part of governance, but also of identity. Safe is also a huge part of identity. So this is kind of like the topics I want to talk about. The usual things, 3. And if I think maybe 10 minutes for the first part, and yes, really 10 minutes for 45 slides, perfectly fine. 5 minutes for the summary. Then I have 10-15 minutes for the topics. Even if I could probably reduce it so much that I could go through each of those in 5 minutes, I don't think it will. It neither will be deep enough to leave a good impression, nor will it make sense, right? It will just overpower people. I could give them an overview of like, look, all these things are important. You need to keep them in mind. But the question is kind of like, do I want to show what's important and then don't go deep and don't offer a path to solutions or opportunities? Or do I want to go deep in one, maybe 2 of those topics and then offer depth? If you're in chat and if you're live, answer now. Or suggest another topic. But let me think for a moment. I would love to talk about identity. Because I think, and this sounds stupid, I think hopefully people will know this. I know that many people forget about it or don't take it seriously or just don't know the history. Maybe that's a jump scare at the end. I mean, I did this as a kind of like a jump scare at the end of the Enter the Metaverse talk. So let's pull up a couple of things. A thing I actually, this is the relationship stuff. So let's think a little bit about identity. What would I talk about? I do know I want to talk about Code Miko. That's a given. If you don't know Code Miko, she's super cool in the sense that she's really driving forward. She just won the Streamer Awards for Best VTuber. And she's doing amazing stuff, really driving forward the VTubing technology and like sense, but also from an entertainment point of view. So not just the technology, how to represent, but also like the entertainment value. And she's riding, she's been banned from Twitch multiple times because she perfectly rides just like what I mentioned before. She's really testing the boundaries of what's currently like allowed in terms of what's the boundary of what we consider good taste in terms of what should we allow virtual representations to do if they do not necessarily match the person behind it. I mean, it starts really with avatars. And that's a digital representation of self in a virtual world. But also the fun question kind of like is, what is identity? Because identity is hard. And then how is real different from virtual, and the added abilities to explore one's identity. Right? Because that's the point. You can like literally be anything. In reality, I cannot switch my gender. I cannot switch my embodiment. But here I can. This is the weird thing. And so we can, some examples about extreme, no, not extreme, now possible types of exploration. And this is around gender, sex, embodiment. And just general representation. Code Miko is an example of that. I mean, there's also this, like, what's that music show? Alter Ego music show as commercial example. That's essentially like one of those talent shows, but they get avatars instead of themselves. As we design the platforms, we create boundaries for these explorations. So if I enter World of Warcraft, I can only choose like the characters, the character list, and the races, and the that have been prepared by the designers. And the one way how to think about that is magic circle, which is a model, a specific model, how to think about that kind of design thing. It's a philosophical thing where if when you design these experiences, everything inside the circle is allowed, or like you want to encourage the player to do. And this is also character exploration, but also behavior, how you interact with other people, or how you should interact with other people, how you as a designer desire your world to function from a social point of view, not from a mechanics player role, but from a social point of view, from an aesthetics point of view. And outside the circle is first a layer of gray zone where it's discouraged, it's kind of like scoffed upon. Technically you can do it, it's not going to be punished, but it's kind of like frowned upon. And then there's the hard stop of this is what's punishable. This is where governance comes in, and where this is where you will have negative consequences. People will be able to, for example, report you. You will be able to block people up to the point where you completely block them from your platform. But I think talking about the magic circle is a good idea. Very oversimplify. Just talking about it in terms of a mental model, how to think about this as a designer, how you want to shape this. But ultimately you need to prepare for trouble, and I think this is really the message I want to give. Prepare for trouble. And you, if you design a platform, or if you run a platform, you will be caught in the middle. Because obviously people will not report if you allow everything, if you make your circle too wide. And let's example, you're the developer of the sandbox. Let me make this big. You're the developer of the sandbox. Hi sandbox people, if you see this. You allow essentially every skin and every avatar. If somebody creates, example, a Nazi uniform as a skin, and people start to wear this, and then let's say you're Adidas and you have a brand store in the sandbox, and somebody walks in with a Nazi uniform, makes screenshots, multiple levels of trouble. The brand who's associated, whose brand space it is affected. The original platform is affected. So it kind of creates this negative effect. And this is just a simple example. Again, there are way more trouble where it's way deeper, it's way more complicated than a simple example. But like you're going to be caught in the middle for things that you can do nothing about. Like, okay, you can essentially block all Nazi uniforms, you can block all forms of offensive skins, you can like avatar skins in that sense. You can have a content review board or content review team that looks at every uploaded skin and item you can have, make sure it's brand appropriate and inside a magic circle. But then identity is going beyond that. Again, back to the example of, what if I, like, male, white, Caucasian, play Asian girl and act like an Asian? Is that cultural appropriation? And then people come in and have this cultural appropriation discussion on your platform, and there's literally no way for you to get away from that, except maybe you essentially completely take away the opportunity for identity exploration and do a full know your customer, and then only allow them to have a base skin that is kind of like matching reality, which would be stupid, because why even then go in a virtual world in the first place? So there will automatically be trouble ahead that you need to be prepared for as a platform designer, but also as somebody entering somebody entering these spaces and these platforms. So there's going to be trouble. I don't necessarily think we can prepare for that, except there shall be shitstorms, right? So have a social team, be kind of like prepare for trouble, be prepared for trouble, right? Prepare yourself. There's no way around this. As we have these discussions on a social collective level, we need to prepare for them. So these are kind of the points I want to make with identity. Is that everything? And again, I'm aware I have 5, maybe 10 minutes for this topic, right? So this is not super deep. But I want to make sure that people understand a couple of points I want to make, and then give at least hints how to do that. Maybe it's interesting to really come up with a prediction for this. Predicting the trouble. Like, within 5 years, one generation wants to talk about digital yellow facing in avatars, while another generation thinks skin color in avatars is just an RGB value. And what are you talking about? I'm green. Atlanteans, cultural appropriation. I don't know. It's weird. It's going to be very weird. It's going to trigger some cultural questions. And these are loaded questions, right? Like racial inequality, that is the not so small subtext that comes with this, is important and is relevant. We cannot argue this away with, oh, we're in a virtual world now. This is also the wrong approach to this. We cannot ignore these subtexts, these real world subtexts. We brought reality into the virtual with these identity explorations, and we cannot and should not ignore those. I think that's also a good point to make. So this is not a dismissive, okay boomer situation. Blackfacing is not an okay boomer situation that you can argue away like that. What we might do is also examples and examples, research, and arguments from early social virtual worlds. We have stuff. Now the other cat wants out. Give me a sec. And we're back. I think that looks good. Identity. So where to, yeah, meh, leave behind statement. Then relationship design. Yeah. Relationship design. Kind of like from here to here. There's a lot more around relationship design. So digital layouts for general personalized scenario based on that's the assumption. Mercedes-Benz example. Showing that things are personified real quickly. Jibo, Moxie. Shaping relationships. Embodiment example. Training things around brand values and identity. This is what brands should do. This is from a brand perspective, and I think this makes sense. Where, and this is what I talked about in the beginning. Who designs the digital assistant in that Mercedes-Benz car when the king is talking to the car versus somebody else? And as soon as you give a thing a personality, and it doesn't matter if this is super low tech, it doesn't matter. Like we personify it, right? And Jibo was a great example, defunct example now, but people throw birthday parties, and Moxie is an amazing current example. Like this is not an animation, this is the actual robot. And it's used for children education and anxiety therapy and treating social issues. It's really cool. Like that's such a great personification of a thing to create a relationship. Really good example. Bravo, Moxie people. But it also means like shaping the relationship between things and people will become core part of branding. And I think this is really part of branding. And you could argue it's part of product design, and that's true, but I argue that branding becomes a strong part of product design. Or product design becomes part of branding. Pick one. It also has something to do with embodiment, where different cars need, or different products and services need to have different personalities. And so you need to train the things around brand values and identities for them to be able to, in every situation, represent the brand values you give them. And this is not just true for cars, this is true for pretty much everything that can be digitized. And this is like relationship design will be a new digital service. Also true for purely virtual things, and then things can be avatars as well, right? Bringing it back to identity. And so it also allows individuals to use brand values and identity as identity representation and exploration. I, as individual, can explore how it would feel to be part of the brand, like literally. I can explore what it means to be a Mercedes-Benz car. It's part of identity exploration. How does it sounds weird and stupid, but how does it feel to be a Mercedes S-Class? And then I explore the A-Class tomorrow, and what is the difference between both? From an embodiment, but also from a representation point of view. It sounds so weird to say stuff like that, but that's essentially what we're talking about. I think it should be a little bit clearer what I mean with that. Back to identity and exploration of being a brand, a branded product. This sounds so weird. This is an important differentiation between being the product in, for example, social media. This is a voluntary identity exploration, and not whoever I am, I'm treated as the product to extract value out of me. So this just seems of, oh, I make myself a product. No, this is very different. And I think this also needs to be designed. And back to, these are magic circles that are now attached to products and services. Right? Because if you don't do it purposeful, or if you don't do it intentionally, people will just do it for you. Like everybody can create an avatar probably, so people will just start creating avatars with your brand. So you should do it yourself. This is just a placeholder slide to bring it both together. So where are we now? Talking about identity, the digital representation of yourself in a virtual world. What is identity? How is it different? And if I go through this, in my head, I'm usually thinking, is this a long slide, a medium slide, or a short slide? Short slide, I just flash for a second or two. Medium slide is anything below 15 seconds, and a long slide is I talk longer, which can take up to a minute. So this very short slide. Medium slide, long slide. Short to medium slide, long slide. One of those is a long slide, the other one is a short. Short, long. Long, because explaining the magic circle. Short, medium. Medium to long. Short, short. Short, short. Long. Medium, medium, medium. Short. Medium to long, probably long. Long. Short, short, short. 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 Medium, long. So we're about, yeah, that's about 20 minutes. Okay. Oh, I hate to do this. I should do a pure governance talk at some point. Then again, I usually point to Rev Costa's talk, and he already did it way better than I ever could. That looks good though. I like that structure, I think. So, how do we name this then? I want to make sure that people understand that the metaverse is not just a place, but also extends into reality. It's also around the metaverse. Technically, then it's like this boundary, it's edge, and with that I do mean edge computing. So maybe it's relationships inside and on the edge of the metaverse. I don't like that. Is that the title? Yeah, let's go with it for the moment. Good. 1 of 3. 1 of 3 is fine. The first one is the real important one. 2 and 3. 2 is it's really a reinforcement. What we probably should do is, there was a slide below here, that one. That's an important one. that we maybe could add here. Because this is essentially, so I do talk about the Metaverse roadmap, right? Which is those 4 quadrants. But what people misunderstand is that people will choose their modality as they go through their individual use cases and scenarios. So, and this is why I don't think the Metaverse is just VR or AR or like goggles, right? It's fluid. You will choose the modality that is currently best for your respective context and use case. And that's important to make. I need to keep this really short, but it's an important point to make. That essentially the point in this one is that these quadrants cannot live on their own. They're highly dependent on each other and dependent on their respective progress. Progress in one quadrant will automatically also be progress in the other quadrant, so they're tightly coupled. So yeah, good structure. I guess all we need now is actual slides. What did I leave out? I usually explain my model. I don't necessarily think I need to explain the model since it's not my model. I'm mostly talking about models that other people have developed. So I make pointers to what I'm talking about and where people can read up more. I don't think I need to explain what mirror worlds are since identity and relationship design covers it since it's the edge, and I should make a nod here that this is mirror worlds and edge based, and this is really edge as in edge computing. Edge computing, also digital twins. Okay, the mixed reality stuff is not necessarily important for the talk. This is going deeper into the model. And this is a summary. And the summary is the summary is this plus identity and relationship profit I don't know, something smart in the end. Haha joke. Yep, me like. And then I assume it's like 115 slides, which again might seem insane for a 30-minute talk. And to an extent it is, but it's a recorded talk, by the way. It's not live, which is unfortunate, which gives me even more time to optimize and like run through it. Again, this is so the way I do these talks is really around, especially if I give them live on stage or like live virtually, or especially when recorded. This is essentially a movie that is going on in the background, which is what people tell you not to do because it's distracting, but it's essentially them watching a movie. Like if I'm live on stage, I would usually go in a slower pace because people should concentrate and focus on me, and I'm on stage, I'm a personality, I can obviously like do stuff and perform, but virtually it's very hard to perform. Either you overperform, but what I found really works is essentially creating this like video like experience of illustrations of the points I make during the call, and then I become mostly a like side assist, an assistant to push the story forward, and it kind of works very well, especially for keynotes. And by works very well, I mean I get pretty good feedback, so I'm not like judging it myself. It's people pointing when I give these kind of talks. People point to it and say I enjoyed it very much. It made sense. It depends on the topic, but I think this is a topic that should inspire, and the keynote should inspire and talk about new things. So the purpose really here is not deep learning of a specific subject, but more broad and horizon. Broadening number one, hey, you're all in the metaverse, regardless of which perspective you're coming from. And broadening number two, it's about identity, and number three, it's about relationship design, and then we cover those three. These are the points we want to make. We can hit those quick and hard. And that's kind of the structure, and usually works very well for an inspirational keynote. Yeah. So this is why it's like this insane structure, but kind of works. Okay. That was a quick one. That was way faster than I expected. But I mean, I kind of cheated. I knew the three topics I wanted to talk about. And again, in a 30-minute talk, you cannot go deep into those. So, yeah, cool. Makes sense. And by the way, what you usually don't see behind the scenes, well, I love doing this stuff live because I usually edit my talks right until the end. Like I drive, especially when I'm live and on stage somebody, I drive the AV crews crazy. And I usually, especially the ones that want my talk in advance, like 3 days in advance, we're going to test it. And I'm like, yeah, You get something 3 days in advance, but I'm going literally 5 minutes before my talk, I'm going to give you the final one, and that's the one. And yes, I know it's on me if it's not working. That's also perfectly fine, and it happened, yeah. But I love just including, hey, this is what the speaker before said. This is, I think, how it ties to the talk that somebody else gave before me, or this is how I think what we can expect from the talk going after. So I love these, like, playing with what else is going on at the conference. So I don't necessarily like pre-recording, but it gives me the opportunity to time this very explicitly. So yeah, I can probably get away with a little bit more content than I would live. So, but still, it's kind of unfortunate. What I do like though, and I don't know if this is public, but let's just say UXistanbul, the virtual one, they have prepared a really cool program. And I'm not spoiling anything. I'm mostly read about how this is going to be, where we will be, and the platforms they're going to use. So there's a lot of goodness there. But I don't know if it's announced yet, so I'm not going to spoil it. But there will be the opportunity for really cool interactions. So I'm going to watch the video with you essentially, and then you can ask questions. And this is also a cool part. Usually when I give when I give keynotes, I do not have, like, people cannot yell questions in the middle of it, and I cannot react to it. Even if you're giving virtual presentations, usually the stream is not active. And here, since it's recorded, I can literally, like, go back and forth in a discussion with the people as they watch it, which is cool. So definitely looking forward to that. So not all is bad in pre-recording your presentation. So yeah, and really kudos to the UXistanbul team. And again, I'm going to prop a bit. This is the conference. It has an amazing lineup. It has really cool, really cool organizers. Really nice team doing it. So yeah, get a ticket. Like, no, I'm really looking forward to it. I love these, and this is what they're doing really, really well. I love these inclusive. So it's not just techies, it's not just designers, it's not just business people. It's a good mix from everybody, not just from the audience, but also from the speakers. And I really, really enjoy that. And also from a project-based background. There are people from virtual worlds, there are people from gaming, there are people from, like, business platforms, art platforms. So really good mix in terms of backgrounds. And these are the conferences I usually enjoy most, where you have, like, interdisciplinary people coming from different interests and approaching things from very different perspectives, and then sharing those perspectives. So like and subscribe them. And no affiliate. Like, there's no affiliate link. I'm not sponsored. I do not make money with this. Not an ad. I should probably. So no, not an ad. I just think it's cool. Like, genuinely think it's cool. Yeah, but I think that's it for today. I'm going to eat something. I do have a meeting coming up, unfortunately. I will work on this for another week. Maybe should we do a follow-up next week? I don't know. Should we do a new topic next week? Should we do a follow-up to this? Let me know in the comments. Ping me on Twitter. Ping me on LinkedIn. But let me know. What do you think? Should we continue with that? Yeah, let me know. Obviously, we'll see the final result at the conference. But yeah, let me know, what do you think? And otherwise, yeah, have a good night. Stay safe. And insert insert key phrase here. I don't have one. Dudes, I'm tired. It's been a long week. It's been a great week. Also, this stuff is tiring. But yeah, have a great day. Have a great weekend. Have a great Friday. See you. Bye.